And finally, this morning, we have our host church sharing with us, giving us tours of the way that they have been active in this community. I'm not sure what the weather is doing outside, so we do have a plan B and a plan C. But I'm going to turn it over to Loretta Benjamin, who is a person of all trades. She's in the front office. I've had many email conversations with her, and I love to see her every time I pop in for a visit. She is more than gracious to let me stay at the mission house, even when I'm just meeting my sister here for a weekend. So if you have a question and you can't find me or Mary, find Loretta and she'll point you in the right direction. So she's going to start them off. Please welcome Loretta.
I've never been clapped for before. That's very embarrassing. My name is Loretta. I have been here a really long time. I don't even like to think about how many years that's been. When we first started here, my son, who's our middle child, was just starting kindergarten. And this last spring, we celebrated his oldest daughter's graduation from high school. So that's how long I've been here. That's a really long time. So we're so glad you're here. We've really been looking forward to this, and this is just a lot of fun for us. And thank you for coming, and thank you for allowing us this time to share with you. I can remember about 35 years ago on a Sunday evening, one of our young men, his name was Dave Tholen, led us through the story of Paul's incredible sea voyage from Caesarea to Rome. There were 276 men on board that particular ship, including God's men, Paul and Luke. Dave Tholen was a seaman at heart. He loved the water, he loved boats, he loved ships, he loved navigation, he loved weather, he loved currents, and in incredible detail, he took us through that voyage like we were there. He explained what was happening, why it was happening, the results of what was happening. I was spellbound. I have heard that story all my life, and I was actually spellbound by that story. There were powerful winds that blew them off course. There were storms. There were threatening waves. I'd heard that story so many times. And Dave's last words when he finished were, God was present with his people every moment. And then he threw up his hands and he said, and where did they end up after all of that? Right where they were supposed to be, according to God's purposes, and no one was lost. And I've never forgotten those last words. It impacted me in a very great way. Englewood will be 127 years old this November. That journey of 127 years has been filled with some strong winds that may have blown us a little off course. Not really sure about that. There have been rains, there have been waves, there have been storms that rocked our boat and tested us to the core. But here we are. God has been present with his people here 127 years, and we believe we are right where we are supposed to be. A very imperfect and a very motley crew of folks seeking the way of Jesus and what that means for us at 57 North Rural Street, as imperfect as we are. I believe with all my heart that some very strong winds of the Spirit have been blowing here these past 25 years. Not the kind of winds that want to blow you off course, but gentle, determined, consistent winds of the Spirit that start nudging you in new directions and into unfamiliar territory. I think it is no accident that the EP gathering is here with this particular theme, because I believe these are the winds that the Spirit has been blowing here these past 25 years. Justice, mercy, grace, compassion, love of neighbor. I think the kingdom of God is made up of 1,000,000 little steps, day after day, small steps upon small steps, the little way upon the little way upon the little way. Sometimes I think if all of God's people all over this planet, wherever they are rooted and planted, would just take those basic little steps and love the folks around them in little ways and be what God has called them to be, I believe this world would be turned upside down in no time at all, and the kingdom of God would come quickly and fully. In the few short minutes that I have, I would like to share some of the new life that I believe the winds of the Spirit have brought here these past 25 years. In many ways, things have been turned inside out and upside down, but that's what the kingdom does, and that's what the Spirit does as he teaches us radical love for each other, for our neighborhood, and for the world. And that is the only way the restoration and reconciliation of God will ever come about. Authentically loving your neighbor means authentically knowing them, authentically engaging with them, authentically entering their broken lives and situations. You cannot keep your neighbors at arm's length. You cannot live in fear of them. You cannot look at them like they're beneath you or less than you or you're better than they are. These kinds of things never will bring the reconciliation and restoration of God. Years ago, many of our folks made the decision to move into the neighborhood and live among not only each other, but our neighbors, and engage with them and put themselves out there to start knocking down the walls, plowing through the barriers, and to be an authentic presence of Jesus here at 57 North Rural. Imperfectly as we do it, our desire is to be the authentic presence of Jesus in this neighborhood. Our church doors are unlocked through the week. That sounds like a really small thing, but it is a huge thing. The stories we could tell you would fill a book. From our homeless neighbors to those who sometimes reek of alcohol or are high on drugs, folks unable to find or keep jobs and unable to pay their bills, those who are just plain angry at everyone, at God, at the world, those who think the world owes them, the church owes them, and God owes them, those incredibly skilled at telling lies and telling stories. I can remember Mike saying once, "Tell me you're a mass murderer, tell me you're a serial killer, but please just tell me the truth. We can deal with the truth, we can't deal with lies." We have many undocumented immigrants that show up here, and I'm so thankful for Umberto and Becky and our Hispanic folks who are such an incredible help and incredible encouragement. And then there are just those wonderfully kind, loving, caring neighbors who have lived here for years and want to understand us and want to know us and want to figure out who we are and want to know that we mean what we say and be connected to us. As we engage with a multitude of different kinds of people all around us, what does the justice and mercy and love and grace of God look like in the midst of all that? If we truly believe God is reconciling all things in Christ, then what might that look like here at 57 North Rural Street? What is the small way of Jesus that brings healing and peace and hope and displays the wisdom of God to the world? I will tell you some of the things that we feel like the Spirit has shown us that looks like. Theology is wonderful, theology is important, and theology is necessary. But if it doesn't work itself out into real life, in real relationships with real people, in a real reality, then it's not really very helpful. For us in this place, the theology of the little way, the way of Jesus, this is what it has looked like the past 25 or so years, and we believe that the Spirit of God has brought these things about. It looks like affordable housing for folks who live in a different reality than many of us do. Their paychecks do not match the cost of rent, and the dream of ever owning a home is way beyond their reach. On your tour, if you hopefully get to take that, you'll get to see some of what God has built here in our area for folks in that situation. Making sure those folks are cared for is far more important than making a profit. We are not unfamiliar with financial losses. It looks like job creation, helping small businesses get established and on their feet. Uplift Produce, Tleoli, Annabelle's, some of our neighborhood places that we hope you will get to see. And something simple like cleaning our building. We have neighbors who, because of particular challenges they have, cannot get a job, cannot hold a job, cannot keep a job. Every morning at 4 o'clock, we have 5 of them who show up here with me, and we vacuum, and we dust, and we mop, and we clean. When daycare opens at 6 and the doors open, this is a welcoming, beautiful place. It helps them earn some money, it gets them engaged, it gets them in our doors, it helps us form relationships with them, and it gets them out of sitting in their apartments all day long, not doing a whole lot of anything. It looks like bringing beauty and purpose back to abandoned buildings. It looks like engaging with neighborhood schools, Purdue Polytechnic and Paramount Englewood over at the Mallory Building where you're having your meals this weekend. Thomas Gregg Neighborhood School is just a few blocks up the street there. A couple of our folks are on the board there. April Adams teaches there, and some of us take birthday bags to all the teachers on their birthdays, just telling them how much we appreciate them and thank you for teaching and loving and caring for the neighborhood children. It looks like authentic partnerships with others also living and working in the neighborhood. St. Philip's Church, Good News Ministries, Wheeler Mission, Shepherd Community, Neighborhood Fellowship, Outreach, who works with homeless kids, Exodus Refugees, City Wheels, who teaches kids how to work on cars, the John Bonner Center. There is no sense of competition like there many times is. There is just the joy of working together for a common purpose. It looks like a memorial service for an apartment resident who passes away with little or no family, or covering funeral expenses for another who died with nothing. It looks like providing a home for a Nigerian refugee mom with 2 daughters, and also a job which she is thriving at. It looks like choosing to continue to live on your street when violence and conflict are common everyday occurrences. It looks like forming an assistance team to meet with folks who come needing financial help so we can discern together how best to really help and come up with long-term solutions instead of just Band-Aids for their problems. It looks like a daycare whose staff makes some very real sacrifices to love the children and make it work. It looks like taking apartment residents and neighbors to grocery stores and doctor's appointments. It looks like providing a home for a woman with MS and building a ramp and helping her get a scooter so she can get around, and cleaning out her cat litter boxes every week because she's unable to do that anymore. It looks like becoming payees for folks unable to manage their finances. It looks like advocating for neighbors who are being taken advantage of. It looks like taking in 2 kids whose mom is in crisis and is spiraling downward. It looks like opening the church building for neighborhood gatherings and meetings. It looks like connecting with women in the Indiana women's prisons so when they are released, they have a home and a job and a plan for moving forward. One of our much loved and much cherished members was incarcerated there for a time, and when she was released, she joined us here. She helped us understand incarceration. She helped us get our foot in the door, and she has been such an incredible gift in so many ways. And I'll cry if I keep talking about her. It looks like a hospitality house, which houses refugee families and missionaries and work groups and brothers and sisters in Christ, just like you. It looks like a Saturday work day where folks divide up into groups and head to homes of folks who need some help. It looks like participation in a home repair program, helping neighbors who can't afford to fix their homes. It looks like sticking with someone who continues to make bad choices and loving them and loving them and loving them. It looks like running across the alley at 6 in the morning to cut the rope off a neighbor and friend who hung himself in his garage. It looks like seeing folks as gifts and not problems. It looks like speaking the truth in love to each other. It looks like sharing homes and cars and lawnmowers and childcare and resources. And lastly, it looks really, really, really messy. Loving each other is messy. It's messy because we are broken and messy. It looks like not being afraid of the messiness, not running away from the messiness, and looking for something easier, which I think we've all been tempted to do every now and then. Willingness, it looks like a willingness to face whatever is out there and walk through it and walk into the middle of it and be a part of it and be a part of the kingdom of God coming in it. It looks like God's people moving forward, one small, loving step at a time. I Thank you. I think now Joe and some of the others have some options for you as far as getting to know our neighborhood, and so I will turn it over to them.
Guys, we've been pretty glued to the radar just to hope that we could kind of do these neighborhood tours with you. But it seems like probably keeping you indoors might be the best call at this point. So with your consent, I think we'd probably like to just continue in this room for the time that we have left. And then there are plenty of us around. We could make a tour option available during one of the workshop times, or even later this evening, if that's kind of a burning desire by you. We'll certainly accommodate that. Many of the things that we hope to show you, we can certainly talk about in here, and I think we all do better during kind of good questions from you that you're really curious about. There's a lot to reflect on and respond to what Loretta just shared. And so I don't think the right call here is for us to kind of continue to march forward and put more in front of you. I do think, though, that if you have questions about some of what you've seen or some of what you've heard relative to our life together and the way that we try to be an authentic presence of Jesus in this place, maybe the right call is, do we have a microphone that we could pass around for persons to ask questions? And again, there are 20-some Englewood folks or so in the room that have something to say about perhaps some of those questions. So I kind of think that might be the best use of the time. I see a couple of other Englewood folks nodding. Sounds good. Do we have one microphone or do we have two? Do we have one? Maybe if some of the Englewood folks that were going to be tour leaders or topic speakers could come forward, and then maybe the microphone could be passed around for people that have questions. And if you're an Englewood person that maybe has something to offer in response to that, maybe you could come up and use this mic. What do we think about that? They're cut off? Okay. Well, so why don't we get started? If some of you would like to respond to some of what Loretta has wonderfully presented, maybe we start with your response or your questions, and we can kind of figure out who from Englewood might have something to say. Susan was asking, should we present anything on the screen? Mary's saying no. Not that capability. Okay. Yeah. All right. Tim is raising his hand. Go for it, Tim.
What if you had the Englewood folk just say what they were going to give a tour of or the topic that they were going to talk about, so we get a sense of what questions we can ask? And those of you up front, I think you can take your masks off. Just helps us see your expression.
Good call. Why don't we do that? Why don't we do that very briefly? So each of you that were topic speakers, come forward and in a minute or so, say what you hope to say. A lot of the folks were just going to be ready to talk about what we encounter along the walk, but for the 5 of you, come forward and talk about what you hope to present.
I don't know. That was a bad choice. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Abigail Lane. I have been around for about 5 years, live on Oxford Street between New York and Michigan with my husband, and I work for the Community Development Corporation here, and work on a lot of our development projects that we were hoping to kind of walk you guys around and see today. But a lot of you have seen the Mallory development, so that's really cool. I was going to be posted at Arabella, which is a little shop that we own and rent out to a lady who kind of sells home decor and furniture and things like that. It's really sweet. going to talk about neighborhood economics a little bit, so talking about kind of the small businesses that we've helped start or given, helped get grants or funding or just things to kind of keep them going, as well as the job creation side of it, so working with folks to find them jobs in the neighborhood or close by that they can get to easily, and that will pay them a living wage. And then also just talk about some of our initiatives that focus on development both along the corridor of East Washington Street as well as right in our neighborhood. So just really focusing on those types of development and really making where we live a thriving place and a place that people want to be, and a place that's accessible to a lot of different kinds of people. So that's basically it.
My name is Lisa Bowling, and I'm one of the co-directors of Daystar Childcare, which is in its 26th year as a childcare facility here on the Near East Side. We started in 1996 because at that time our state and our country had formed a program called Welfare to Work. And so our neighbors were not allowed to receive welfare unless they were looking for or had a job. And we noticed around our neighborhood that there were no child care facilities to watch the children while their parents had to go to work. And so we started very small. We had a very good 3-day-a-week preschool, and so we could build off that, something that had been started in the 80s. And it has expanded from that very small program until we serve about 180 families. I think today, there are probably 160 children all around us here in this building today. So they've tried to be really quiet. They're coming and going, but you know, we're not always the quietest thing. And we are hard on the building. We play hard. We tear things up, and our church has just always been very gracious to the families that we serve. We are nationally accredited with the governing body that accredits child care facilities throughout the country and preschools. We're very proud of that. We were the first child care facility in central Indiana to participate in the state's voluntary rating system, and we are at the top of that rating system because we felt if we were going to do child care, then we needed to be, as a church, doing everything that we could to do the very best job for our families. So we started because we wanted quality childcare and education for our youngest children. It has really morphed into, we have found the 2-generational model has worked very well for us, and that really just means that we have to meet families where they are. And we know that if families are struggling, the children will struggle. If mom doesn't know how she's going to pay her rent, or dad loses his job, then that impacts the children. And so we have people within our facility who work specifically with our families to make sure that our families are whole, because we know that's what's best to provide quality child care. We also, because all over the country for many years, there's been quite a shortage of educators. And so we struggle very hard to find quality people to care for our children. And so some days I feel like I'm running the Job Corps because we're teaching teachers to care for children, but we're also providing them with a pathway to get their first credential in childcare, to get their associate's degree, and even to get their bachelor's degree, which we're very proud of, as some of those teachers, after many years of taking classes one at a time, receive their bachelor's degree, and they're starting their master's in January. So we're really very proud of them. But we have had to work with a lot of single moms who have children of their own with no support, helping them find housing, helping them find cars. So we rely on City Wheels and the Bonner Center and ECDC to help our employees find those things that they need. And we're just very grateful, and our families are so appreciative and of the care that those children receive. And we're really thankful to be here and for the work that we do. It's good work, and we're glad to be a part of it.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Melissa Benton, and I was going to talk today about community partnerships. So in my day job, I work for John Bonner Neighborhood Centers, and we are a social service agency that's been on the Near East Side of Indianapolis for about 50 years now. And in the role that I have there, I oversee our community partnerships. And when I'm not at Bonner Center, I live in Oxford Flats, which is the apartment building that Englewood did across from the garden. And a lot of the partnerships and programs that Bonner Center has done have been partnerships with Englewood. We partnered together to redo School 3 into the Commonwealth Apartments, partnered together on the PR Mallory project that a lot of you guys have been in. We got to partner with Daystar on a program called Great Families 2020. You heard Loretta mention the Women in Motion program, which is probably still my favorite one that we've ever partnered in. And so I really, most days, not every day, but most days, feel like the luckiest person in the world to really mesh these two worlds that I live in with two kind of organizations and groups of people that I love so much. So I am happy. I could probably talk all day about community partnerships, and Joe was very clear about a time limit. So I will be around later tonight. I do have to go to work after this, unfortunately, because I have a grant application due Monday, but I'll be around tonight. So if you want to talk more about community partnerships, or if you want to see Oxford Flats, which is really the best apartment building that Englewood has done, or if you want to talk about anything related to prison, incarceration, reentry, or Broadway musicals, any of those, I'm your girl. So Joe or Mary or anybody from Englewood can tell you where to find me later.
Hello, I'm Stephanie. I work for ECDC in the property management realm of things. So we currently have about 170, 180 units of housing. I spend most of my time in our low-income senior housing, which is for people 55 and older. And I've been lucky to have a lot of my time focused on supporting our residents who have come directly out of chronic homelessness. And we have a lot of avenues that we get to use to help keep people supported and help keep them housed. One of the most tangible examples is the Eviction Prevention Fund that the church manages, which is so helpful in our work because we just have the opportunity to, I can present a situation to that team and almost always immediately get the approval I'm requesting to pay someone's rent for a month or to step in and just other helpful ways to support them. Sometimes that looks like church folks coming and deep cleaning for hours in a unit that's where most people wouldn't want to step a foot in, because of helping keep people housed often is a lot more than just giving them money. So really grateful for the ways that Englewood partners with the work, the way that the church partners with the work, because we would not be able to keep people housed in the way that we do without that. So that's all I'm going to say. Feel free to ask more questions. I live across the parking lot. Okay.
My name is Debbie, and I've been at Englewood my entire life. My parents lived in this neighborhood. I was going to say they grew up here, and they met each other, and here I am. So anyway, I'm here to talk about the Englewood Nature, Play Space, and Gardens, mostly just called the Garden. And I'll tell you a little bit about that space and how it came to be. Over there, that was both, there's like 3 city lots there, all parking lots for the Crown Laundry that was across Washington Street for many, 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 many years. And people parked there. As the Crown Laundry closed and as the neighborhood changed, those parking lots were abandoned. They grew stuff on them, you know how city lots will do. And it became a place, someone put a fence around it, and it became a place that attracted unsavory types, let's just say. Bad things were happening in that lot, and the police were like getting called there all the time. And at some point, they came and just asked us, like, hey, will you take this lot? Just half of it, I think. We didn't get it all. Will you just take this lot and do something constructive and purposeful on it? And we said, well, sure, okay. So some of us sat around and we're trying to decide what to do. And we had already been talking about gardening and trying to live a little bit more sustainably and that kind of thing. And so we decided gardening would be the thing to do. And, well, you're not going to plant anything in a parking lot, so even one that's kind of broken up. So we put in raised beds, and we really didn't know what we were doing. A couple of us took a master gardening class, which just means you know where to go to look for answers now. So we had beds for a while, and then the daycare started growing, and it's like, okay, let's take the kids out and let's garden, because that's like really a cool thing to do with kids, right? They just rather chase butterflies and grasshoppers. So we did a little bit of gardening with kids, but mostly we let them run around and play with sticks and chase butterflies. Suddenly something's going off in my head. I'm basically by nature an outdoorsy kind of person, and I was determined never to live in the city. Here I am. And so it suddenly dawns on me, you know, kids just need to play in nature, with nature. And so what can we do? And having gardens there is good. They need to know where their carrots come from and things like that. So over the course of time, we were able to acquire the other half with partners, Keeping Indianapolis Beautiful, and some other partners, and a few grants that we managed to persuade people to help us get. We were able to create bring nature into that spot. We knew it was going to be more of a public space than just a daycare space, because we're not going to fence it in and close it off from our neighbors. So it's kind of like semi-public. When it's daycare hours, it's for the daycare kids. And so the idea being that they can get out there, they can run, jump, climb, learn about their environment, the natural world as best you can. And then it's available to neighbors to use. They can reserve it for parties, or they can just hang out, which both things happen. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell, and if you want details or more, I'll be around hit and miss, and I'll be in the office in the afternoon. So I think that's enough.
Yes, oh, cool. I just moved to my new parish a year ago, and we have it's a very different setting. It's a rural mountain setting. But I'm in a predominantly Caucasian Methodist congregation, and 5 minutes from us is a predominantly African American community called Piney. And I'm just wondering where to even start with friendships with that. I mean, and I'm not getting involved in here comes the white people to the rescue and all. I mean, you all have taught me a lot better than that, But where does a opportunity for even getting a friendship start? And I guess I'm asking the pastor here, where was your first, where was your first move? So anyway.
I will say the first move is what I thought Loretta outlined quite well, and that is and why EP has been so important to us. It's because very early on, some really wise people here that were here long before I got here recognized that it's the church being the church, not the church doing a bunch of stuff. And so there was just a heavy emphasis on what does it mean for the church to be a real community? What does it mean to really care for each other? How can we say we care about our neighbor when we don't even care for each other? And so there was a lot of lessons learned over time about that. We never tried to fix any of the social problems that surrounded us. We looked for what God had supplied in terms of the gifts of our members and our members as gifts. And it was just kind of one step in front of the other, day at a time. Opportunities come. Try to be imaginative about that. A word that at least some of us like to use is proleptic. We like to live kingdom lives before the kingdom's fully here. And so it's just a daily thing. As far as we lament that we are not nearly as racially diverse as we would like to be. what little work that we've done, we have started to form some very close friendship with other congregations, and have been met with great hospitality, and we've developed some really close friendships. And if you still are around on Saturday, as soon as 12 o'clock hits and EP is over, there's a group of us that are headed to Irvington, which is just a few miles from here, to be with First Baptist Church of Irvington. They're having their community day. And they said, we don't want you to do anything. We don't want you to pay for anything. We just want the rest of our white neighbors who kind of shunned them to see that we've got white friends. That's a pretty low bar. And so that's what we're going to do. You're welcome to join us from 1 to 4 in that neighborhood. But just forming friendships with other entities, whether it's like a Bonner Center or some other work that's going on, to really try to be deep friends, not looking to how you can use them. And oftentimes partnerships are about how I can use you. And we work really hard at just how can we be a really good friend to you? How can we be a really good partner for you? And what we've just found is that just has always been a gift to us, a blessing to us.
Hey, thanks for this, you guys. I'm Kelly, and I teach at the University of Dayton and worship at St. Benedict the Moor in Dayton, Ohio, and I'm happy to give autographs to those pamphlets if anybody wants it for a small fee. I've been waiting for that one a long time. So I have two questions that are related, and one is kind of big overarching spiritual thing, and the other is pretty practical. The big overarching spiritual thing is, like, how do you guys deal with fear? Because, I mean, it just seems to me, like, I look at the things you do, and I think it's just amazing how often you're stepping out into things that are complicated and difficult and put you in positions of more vulnerability and uncertainty. And so kind of what wisdom do you have about fear, which can sometimes be a sign that I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing, and other times is a sign that I'm being held back from something I should be doing. So yeah, so how do you think about fear? And then the like really brass tacks version of that is, what's your relationship with local police? Because I heard this mentioned at a point now and again, like it sounds like a constructive relationship, but like, do you call the police? How do you relate to them? So those are my questions.
Like any of us, I'm sure, could probably answer that. My name is Katie Lines. I serve as pastor here along with Mike and Umberto and all of us together doing the work. Kelly, that's a good question. I would say that we first of all recognize that many of us do have things that we're afraid of, but we also have the Spirit of the living God who dwells here among us. And so sometimes those things are hard to bear in tension with each other. And yet that's one of those things that we do practice, that if Christ's Spirit is here among us, within us, what is it that we have to be afraid of? And so it also means that because we are together here in community, we aren't trying to do things by ourselves, either as individuals or as an individual entity of the expression of Christ here in this place. That is, we have friends, and we are sisters and brothers. We are siblings here together. And often, I think, knowing that you aren't trying to do something by yourself reminds you, that gives you a lot more courage to step forward, even when the steps forward are done in darkness. Even when you aren't quite sure what it is that your foot is going to land on. So it doesn't mean that we don't have fear, but we choose regularly to not let that fear be something that drives our actions. Whether it means that we are willing to take a risk in trying a new initiative as a community, or whether it means our willingness to walk in our streets or our alleys at night. Those are different ways that we refuse to let fear be something that drives us. And there may be somebody else that wants to add more to that from our community as well. But to your question of the logistics of working with police, it's again, an ambiguous relationship. We are not afraid to call them when necessary. There are times when they are called when there are guests here in our space that it's just not safe for other people when they are here. So we are not afraid to call when that happens. And we do have, Mike and Umberto and I regularly meet with the beat officer here in this area and just kind of do check-ins with him, and a number of other clergy folk get together for coffee over at Needhammer once a quarter or so. But we also realize that relationships with the police, it's challenging, you know. So we do kind of walk carefully with that as well. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything more to that. Steph?
Yeah, I, just to the police piece specifically, definitely call the police, have had to pretty regularly in my work. What makes me more comfortable with that is that I have pretty close relationships with residents. So usually I am there before the police are. Usually I get called, I show up, I can assess what's going on and have enough experience in this work to know if the police should be called or not. And then it helps a lot that I'm already present. So I have so much respect for our police force here and have seen them handle so many situations with a lot of gentleness and wisdom. And sometimes it maybe helps that I'm there and that I've already de-escalated. I'm sure that does make a difference, and that I can speak to what's going on. I think that diminishes some of the fear, since I know if people are armed or not or whatever else. Many, many times, though, I am so grateful that I have two armed men with me when I've had to enter certain situations, when we've had residents who are being exploited, taken advantage of, and really the police presence means that I'm able to protect very, very vulnerable people. So, yeah, that is something that I've definitely, doing the work I've done, I've had my perspective shift a lot, and the police always defer to me. They usually, not usually, they pretty much always defer to me, sometimes too much. One time we were having to get through a barricaded door where a resident was being taken advantage of. Likely people were armed inside, and they told me I had to go first. And I was like I stepped back, right? And they're like, I was like, are you kidding? They're like, we legally can't. I'm like, oh. So we've also had the police work with us with concerning drug trafficking situations, and have had to collaborate pretty well with them to try to do some undercover stuff. And that's always, again, been in situations where we have vulnerable residents being taken advantage of. Yeah.
Just one more thought to your first question, Kelly. I think I would point back to what Loretta said, that a lot, certainly we all have fears here, but a lot of that can be mitigated by very mundane, ordinary sorts of relationships, just smiling at neighbors, getting to know neighbors in just ordinary sorts of ways. And really, it's profoundly transformed us for us over the long haul, I think. As well as I would also point to our practices of conversation, which we intentionally practice on Sundays. Some of you are familiar with that, but the ways in which that we are learning to talk with one another I think some of the richest fruits of that are learning to trust one another and also learning to trust our neighbors as we're able to talk to them in very ordinary, everyday sorts of ways. And I think that really helps to mitigate a lot of the fears. It doesn't completely eliminate them, but it really makes us, as Katie was kind of saying, makes us willing to take risks and to step out. And that's just the nature of kind of how trust works, and really, I think, is part of the way that we have been designed in the image of God to be in relationship, to be in conversation, and to make ourselves available to one another and to our neighbors in that way.
Just to kind of briefly, is this on? To briefly feed off of what Katie said and Chris said, I just think, working in the church office, I'm there right by the door. I'm the first person that whoever, sorry, I just, my husband says, keep your arms still. I can't focus on what you're saying. I am the first person that people come into contact with when they come to the door, and I would be lying to you if the thought has not occurred to me from time to time that if someone comes in with a gun, as happens a lot in this country now, if someone comes in with a knife, I'm probably the first person that's going to get it. And I would be lying to you if I say that doesn't cause some fear, because I have a husband, I have children, I have grandchildren. There is a certain amount of fear in that, but I know that I am not alone. And even if I'm sitting in the office alone and nobody's back in any of the other offices and everyone's upstairs and I appear to be alone, I am not alone. And I'm not talking about just the spiritual talk of God is with me. God is certainly with me. But I have a community of people who are with me. Whether they're physically with me right at that moment or not, they are with me. And that makes all the difference in the world. And what Chris touched on too is Jesus put himself out there. He put himself out there. And that is what we are called to do. We can put ourselves out there and do what God has created us and called us to do, or we can hide so we can be safe. I vote for putting ourselves out there if we really want to see the restoration and the reconciliation of God. And if it ultimately costs us our life, then that's okay. I mean, it's easy to say when it's not happening right now, but it really is okay. It is okay.
I'll add one more thing. Just on the fear thing, the community aspect's been touched on. I think, to me, and these guys have heard me say it, I think one of the most amazing scriptures is when in the high priestly prayer, Jesus prays that the church will be as united together as he and the Father are united. And it's like we don't really even read and digest what that means. It's sort of like, and so if that's true, like, what is community? What is congregational life? If that's true, if my relationship with Chris should be as close as Jesus and God, there's so much there. And I think in the church, the traditional church, we settle for this sort of sense of community. And these guys have heard me say it. It's like, what if we invited you for dinner last night and we didn't give you Giacomo's pizza? We just brought the pizza in so you could smell it, so you got a sense of pizza. It's like, who wants a sense of pizza? Like, you want pizza. And so I just think of that, the sort of the call for unity in community, et cetera. And it's just like, that's not a sense of community. I hate that phrase so much. And we settle for that because, well, I don't know why we settle for that, but we don't have to. And so
I just had a question, and it's kind of a two-part question. As you guys have displayed, Englewood does a lot of different kinds of things. And so my question is kind of about the decision-making process in that, what projects are discussed and thought of, and how does that decision-making process happen? And then what is, if someone could speak to the relationship between the community development side of things and the church side of things, how do those things kind of relate to one another?
What was the first question again? What was the second question again? Well, okay, let's start backwards, I guess. The relationship between the church and the corporation, the Community Development Corporation, I've always just figured the Community Development Corporation is the church getting physical, enacting the things that we've talked about for a while, and it just gave us the capacity or the agency or the tools to do that. And some people see they're more of a separation, but I just really see the Community Development Corporation as just a physical extension of the church trying to live out the claims that we make for ourselves. Decision-making process is kind of like a free-for-all, I suppose. We don't have real highly formalized structures of decision-making. We just talk about things a lot, and we do things. So a lot of times decision-making is more a trying something or a doing something or saying, oh, we ought to be doing this, or it would be good because there's this situation. So it's mostly situation-driven, I would say, rather than, it's like talking about fear. You know, we don't operate out of theories on fear. We just have situations. We have people, and like Stephanie says, if you're trying to take care of somebody, you don't have time to deal with fear. You know, you've got to deal with the situation. And so pretty much everything that we do is driven by actual conditions, situations, people that we're in relationship with, and not theories that we have about what churches should be doing or what some kind of an ideal expression of church is, but just where are we and what's going on here and what's happening and what's our history been and how have we contributed to what is here and how are we going to contribute moving forward to what's actually here.
Mark Ryan, also University of Dayton resident. So I was particularly interested. I think Abby was the first one to talk a little bit about business. And as I hear and kind of experience the church, and especially in light of the last question, it occurs to me that Englewood is kind of fluent in a couple of different languages, the language you speak to government agencies or fund grantors and so forth, and then the language you speak in worship and so forth. The business part is of interest to me. I teach business students. I almost said I have to teach, but I have the privilege of teaching business students. And I wonder what terms you would use to describe a bit more the good there, the value of these businesses. And I sampled the cider, which I maybe not quite a part of the church's outreach. I don't know, but you know, the more advanced part of this question might be: do you run into trouble in the business environment ever? Because you know, Anheuser-Busch might come along and want to buy the local cider place or something like that. But the main question is, how do you see the good of these small business operations where you're involved and for the people that you get employed there.
Who's in the green shirt? You've been pointed to. Who's Dave? Okay.
So, a lot of almost everything we've done has been looking at our community and looking at the assets it has and and a lot of times the assets can look like deficits. So, like our community 10 years ago had almost no commercial development, and we had 2 or 3 wonderful folks that we were in relationship that had a desire to open businesses. So like Ash and Elm, for example, they actually, even them, they got their start in a building that we helped rehabilitate, saved it from hopefully not getting demolished. It had a gigantic, it was the whole building was a killing field for pigeons, like when we first got it, because the ceiling was open and there was a hawk that lived right at the top. So it was on its way out. But by looking at that and seeing the decisions we make aren't always just driven by like, oh, here's of some master plan for controlling the community, but actually what would be good and what has God given us in our community. And so we had these folks. Again, a lot of the business stuff we've done has not been, it's been by people just picking up things along the way. People learning how to go after grants, people learning how to access properties. But yeah, I think one of our bigger concerns to your question was like, how do you keep in a changing world? I mean, the world that we did that in is different now than it is now. How do you keep this community from becoming something that is bought out by Anheuser-Busch, or like it does have a completely corporate view? So those are things we struggle with right now, and we've got some thoughts about how that might go on, but again, it's a lot of questions that are still in our head too.
Hello, I'm Brian. I am Katie Lyons' younger son, and I have worked at Tlowley, just right next to the church, for about 4.5 years, off and on. I'm at college now, so I only really work over the summers. But it's been phenomenal, just almost entirely because of the owner. Carlos is one of the kindest people I've ever met. He's not a part of the church community, and he actually lives pretty far out of this area. But he loves this neighborhood, and he loves interacting with everyone who comes in and helping them with what kind of food they can eat and the options that we have, and doing our best with prices in this neighborhood. But it's been the good of the business is what I've seen. It's in the same place as this church, but I interact with almost completely different people than I do in this church community, just with people coming in from outside of the city or who don't interact with the church as much, but just kind of want Mexican food and tacos, and just interacting with people and building up relationships with people that I wouldn't see if this business wasn't here. And they come in pretty regularly, which is pretty awesome. So it's just phenomenal to see relationships build around the kindness that started with Carlos wanting to start this place, and with ECDC working with him to have this business here. But that's just one small business in the area.
Yeah, just one other thing. I think some of the good that I've seen just in the small time that I've been here is that as a organized community development corporation that has relationships with other organizations, we are really able to advocate for businesses that are helpful to the neighborhood, that really are providing community good to the neighborhood. And as kind of that organized body, we're able to go to the city organizations and to other people, and to kind of create relationships with them and make requests for small businesses like Tlawley and like Arabella and even larger developments like the PR Mallory development, and really showcase what good that's going to have in the neighborhood versus larger corporations that that may come in and want to do other things to our neighborhood. And one of the most helpful things that we've been able to say to folks around us is that, you know, we have both the neighborhood's best interest at heart, and we are all living in this neighborhood, so it's not something that we are doing to another neighborhood. It's something that we are able, we are also going to feel the effects of, and we are going to be here, and we are going to visit the businesses, frequent the businesses, and see the effects of that. So I think that's one of the most helpful things that I've seen.
Professor, follow the thread here. So we had a lady in the church 15, 20 years ago who worked for a bank. She did bookkeeping for a bank. She was pretty well burnt out. And she said, I would love to be around the church more. I love what's going on. I just want to be around the church more. I'll just do whatever needs to be done. And we said, well, I mean, we have our own church books that need to be done, and we pay people for that. And so maybe we could find some other folks that you could do bookkeeping for and kind of do it, keep you whole, and give you a little bit more freedom. We did that. We found people. People were desperate for that kind of bookkeeping. How much are we going to charge? Well, how much do we pay Carol? How much does it cost kind of to keep Carol in business? That's it. That's all we're charging. We undercut the market considerably. It continued to grow and grow. Eventually, we took on a church relationship, a Presbyterian church here in the city, and we did their books. They were deliriously happy with Carol and the work that we did. They wanted more and more hours of her. I mean, it was a pretty good-sized church that had a kind of a complex ministry. There came a point in time when we looked at that situation and said, you know what? Really, it's in their best interest to hire someone themselves, to have someone on staff to do that. So we fired ourselves. We sat down with them. We said, we love you. We care about you. We've negotiated. You want to pay us more. We want to take less, which is weird. But if you love your neighbor, wouldn't you want the best for your neighbor? And if they love you, they're going to want the best for you. And isn't that what we're trying to display in the neighborhood? And we fired ourselves. Bookkeeping continued. Along the way, there's this crazy kid who went to Auburn, and he did bookkeeping, a major at Auburn, and he heard the call of God. And he went to seminary, and he got an MDiv from seminary, and he wanted to land here with his lovely wife, who was a nurse. He landed here. We gave him some things to do, and he realized that what this community needed was someone who was a CPA. And so he hunkered down, and he pushed his way through to become a CPA, and the church supported him by giving him space, giving him time, supporting him in that. And he eventually became a CPA with the help of a sister congregation whose pastor was a CPA. And that's the thread. And so now he's here, and there's multiple businesses involved, and once upon a time he asked me the question, Mike, do you think there's really going to be enough work for me as a CPA? And now he laughs about that. So that's one story, and that's the thread, and I think it's kind of symptomatic of what has happened here. But honestly, if there's a philosophy, it is most business is exploitive. That's what we see in the world. And what does it look like for it not to be exploitive? What does it look like to say, if we love you, we want to do the very best work for you as inexpensively as possible. But gosh, we need a world that's reciprocated. Well, we want to pay you as much as we can, and so you negotiate that. It's not market driven, it's relationship driven, and that's the best I can do for that.
given our time, I think we have time for one or two more questions.
It's just been really neat to see the neighborhood, always is. I'm just wondering, do you see any moving out of the people who used to live here? Or is it, I mean, it feels like your commitment is that they can stay. And I don't know if you've seen any transformations in the neighborhood of the types of businesses. It was neat just to hear what he said about the Mexican restaurant, how that pulls in the people that you would want to be around. And I'm just wondering if you've seen any demographic changes in the neighborhood, or has it felt like it's done what you were really hoping, that they could stay and live and really be here and not have to be pushed away?
I think one of the biggest things around here over the last 5 or 7 years has just been the demographic changes, not just in our Englewood neighborhood and not really on the Near East Side. I mean, you guys are reading the news. You see the ways that housing prices are going up most places, and they're going up here even faster. And that's really not directly related to work that Englewood has done. It's just sort of like where we're located, so close to downtown Indianapolis, which is a good downtown, it's a bustling downtown, et cetera. And so prices continue to go up. Now, again, like from where y'all are coming from, it's still crazy low, like average sale price, Dave's our realtor, $120,000 or so right now. Higher, yeah. And that's 4 times higher than it would have been 7 years ago. So again, for us, it's just like, what is happening? For you, that still sounds pretty low. So trying to come to grips with that, we've tried to get out ahead of that and say, look, we know that we used to just be able to kind of go to the city and it's just like, we'll give you properties because like no one wants to live where you guys are. And that was really only a decade ago. Now it's markedly different where individual single residential lots are selling for $40,000 or $50,000, and the homes constructed on them are $400,000 and $500,000. So we've tried to buy more property so that we can develop those equitably over the next 10, 20 years. And I mean, candidly, we have 5 affordable housing developments, almost fully funded, 1 under construction. That would add another 175 units of housing to the 175 that we have now. And again, those will be rent restricted. They will be for persons at 60% area median income and below. About 50 of those will be for homeless neighbors that come directly out of homelessness. So just trying to brace for the demographic change has been a big part of what the last 5, 7 years has been like. But again, a day at a time, trying to think down the road, but yet trying to live in the present. I don't know.
So one of the biggest, the work that we're going to do is going to be kind of a small fight against that. It's not, our neighborhood will change. We will lose a large number of our low-income neighbors. And where a lot of the work we've done is going to keep a lot of them in. We're doing a couple of things, and we're looking at a couple of things, but I mean, like, on the interior of our neighborhoods, we're going to lose a lot of the diversity. So we don't, I mean, we've done a lot to multifamily affordable housing, but within the neighborhood, and we do have one scattered site project that Joe has mentioned that will keep some of that in the neighborhood, but that is one of our bigger fears, is like the nature of what do you do when the nature of your community changes? Like when you go from being a neighborhood where we're the wealthiest kind of to the poorest in our neighborhood. Like when we moved in, most of us were middle class. I mean, none of us were, but most of us were, the average income was drastically lower. Now it's going to be different. So that's an adjustment that we're going to have to get used to. Like what is our place in trying to maintain a place for those in our community.
All right, that brings us to the end of this second plenary. Thank you so much, Englewood folk, for being here with us. You now have about a 15-minute break I don't know what the weather's like outside, if you want to go out and take a breather. Again, there are refreshments in the parlor over here, but we will reconvene at 10:45.